In addition to formulas, we have to talk about functions, because functions are basically pre-built formulas that somebody has already built for you. They're really easy to use and they can save you a lot of time. A function can be the entire formula or it can be part of a formula, and I will show you both. In my example here, I have this column of numbers. We did this crazy addition formula that says I4 plus I5 plus I6 plus I7 plus I8, and that's really tedious, and you could imagine if I had 50 or 100 numbers in that column that I really would not want to build a formula that looks like this. So we want to take a different approach. I'm going to click on that cell and hit delete. My formula is gone. And instead I want to use a formula that contains a function. So I'm still going to start with the equal sign that says, here comes a formula, but now I want to use a function. And functions are used, they start with the name of the function, and then parentheses, and inside parentheses are the information that you need to get the right answer. Here I'm going to say sum, and then when I hit my parenthesis, then what it's saying is, well, give me the numbers that you want to sum together. And the beauty of this is that I can do it in a range, which we have not talked about, but a range is simply a set of cells that are touching each other. And in this case, I can select that range with my mouse. So I said equal to sum, and then I use my mouse to, whoops, I killed it there, so equal to sum, and then I'm going to use my mouse to select all the cells that go into that, and then I'm going to close my parenthesis. And notice that when you make a range, what Excel does is it gives you the starting cell and the ending cell, and they're separated by a colon. And that gives you basically all of the values in all of the cells in that group of cells, starting with I4 and ending with I8, which would be right here. So when I hit enter, it adds them up for me, and this works just as effectively as my previous formula, meaning that if I change numbers here, my total will update as I change those numbers. I can use a function inside of a formula. Here's another set of numbers. What if I wanted to get the average of these numbers, which would be kind of crazy because we're going from 2 to 216. But let's go ahead and do that. So equal to average, open parenthesis, and now I'm going to get my range. And there's my formula, and then I'm going to multiply it times the number of numbers that we have, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's just say 5. I could have used a count function, but I don't want to get too confusing at this point. In this formula, what we have is we have a function, the average function, that's going to look at this range of numbers and give me the average, and then I'm going to multiply that average by 5. And the point of this is to show you that we can combine functions and literal numbers, and if we wanted to, we could even then add a value from a cell address, just so that you can see all of these things can be combined into a single formula. So there's my answer. The answer is 251. Let me break that down just real quick so you can see it. So the average here is 49.6. I can multiply that times the number of cells. So that was 5, and that gives me 250. And then if I wanted to add a value there, so that would be 253 now, or 250 plus C15. Well, what just happened? Sorry, that gave me 248, and then if I add 3 to it, that gives me 251. Now, notice I used average here. If I use the median, will it change? And I'm guessing it will because the average is skewed by this 216, whereas I have lots of smaller numbers in there. So I think the median will change my result significantly. And it did. It went from 251 to 48. But the point of that wasn't what the answer is. The point of that was to show you that I can mix functions and operators, times, multiply, plus, minus, in the same formula. Let's do a formula with two functions in it. So now I'm going to multiply the median of that range times the count. So count looks at the number of numbers in a given range. And I'll get 45, which is the median times, in this case, 5. It's important to know that there are lots of functions in Excel and that each function requires different numbers of parameters or input values so that it can do its work. If I wanted to calculate the payment on a loan, I would need to give it the interest rate, I would have to give it the number of years, and I would have to give it the amount that I'm borrowing. So let's say I'm borrowing $100,000 and I'm doing it for 30 years, and the interest rate is 5.5%, so 0.055. I can now use that information to build the payment function, so equal to PMT, that's the payment function. And then notice that as I type after my parenthesis, underneath the cell, it's telling me what information it wants. So it wants the rate next, and then the number of periods or number of payments, and then the present value of the amount that was borrowed. I can also press this function paste or insert function button, and that will pop open all of the arguments for my function. I'm going to try to position this so that I can see everything that I need. So my interest rate, I can now click on it. Now that's an annual rate, so I'm going to have to divide it by 12. My number of periods is 30 years, so I'm going to have to multiply that by 12. And then the amount to borrow is right there. And so I can fill in the different values in my function using this function arguments box, or I can just type them directly into my formula as I'm going, and if I do that, it will show underneath the formula what it's asking for next. The parameters have to be given to it in the right order. If I put the amount to borrow in the interest rate, things are going to go a little bit haywire. And what this tells me is that at 5.5% interest, $100,000 for 30 years would be $567 a month. Let's see what happens if I accidentally put things in the wrong order. So here I'm going to use J15 first, and then take it off the end of the function. And now it thinks that the interest rate is $100,000, which I have no idea what it's going to do, but I think it's going to get really ugly, and it did. So I'm borrowing, I don't know, $700 million is my payment, and that's because my interest rate is so ridiculously high. So it's important to get your parameters in the right order so that the function knows what information it's supposed to use where. But this is entry of the payment function. Here would be the sum function I have over here. Oops, that's not sum function. I could do a sum function here equal to sum and then range, and then close my parenthesis, and notice that the sum is only going to take one parameter, which is a range of numbers, though I could use multiple numbers in my sum function. That takes us to the auto sum that we really need to talk about as well. Excel figured that you would be doing lots of sums of columns and averages and some other things. As a result, they gave us this beautiful tool called auto sum. Let me just build some random numbers. So there's one column of random numbers. Let's make another one. column while we're at it. All right, so I just made those numbers up on the fly, but if I wanted to get the sum of this column, I can simply click at the bottom of the column, go to my AutoSum function and click it, and it will automatically fill in for me, hey, I see you're at the bottom of a column of numbers, let me give you the sum. The sum is equal to sum of B4 through B8, yep, that's what I want, and when I hit enter, it's got the sum for me already. Let me undo that. I can also do AutoSum this way, where I select a column of numbers and one empty cell past it. And when I hit AutoSum now, what it's going to say is, hey, you've got all those numbers selected in an empty spot. I'll just put the sum in the empty spot. So that gave me the same result, one less click because I chose an extra cell. Let's undo that. One of the things I really like about AutoSum is I can select multiple columns of numbers with one extra spot, or I could just go across the bottom of all these columns and then hit AutoSum. It will automatically give me the sum for all of those columns at the same time. It'll also do that for rows. So here I've selected the rows and AutoSum, and it just added a cross for me. Like, that's pretty sweet. And if you need to cross tab, I could select the whole range, plus a extra column on the end, plus an extra row on the bottom, and hit AutoSum, and it will automatically give me the column totals, the row totals, and the grand total down here in the corner. So, super powerful tool. By the way, if you wanted something other than a sum, there's a little pull down to the right of AutoSum, and you can choose average, count, max, min, and even some additional functions. We're not going to worry about that now, but it's pretty useful.